Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show and to yet another Brexit special. In a week of high drama at Westminster, the Prime Minister's plan went down to a devastating defeat, but still, she's hanging on in there for dear life. Today, our panel of MPs and commentators marvel about her instinct for political survival in circumstances which would have been the end of any previous Prime Minister.
She's managed to stick around. She's certainly got stickability. Whether or not that, that adhesiveness will last, I don't know. She's certainly wearing it out, it seems to me.
We asked the people with positive ideas, what now for Brexit and what now for the country? Today, we also question whether Brexit really is the ill wind that blows nobody any good. Or could a bad Brexit actually be good news for Scotland's ferries? But first to your tweets, your messages and your emails. And we hear from Callum Fairweather, who says, really loved this interview on the Alex Salmond Show tonight. Now, Callum is, of course, referring to the interview with Chris McElhenny. I managed to find this very useful and informative. Keep up the good work. David, still on the subject of Chris, says, what a measured and informative interview you gave on the Alex Salmond Show. A great introduction to the issues involved and what's at stake in your case. Maureen says, a disgrace that this should happen with the Ministry of Defence. They're not above employment law. And we should add, Maureen, we are still waiting for a response or even a statement from the Ministry of Defence to the questions we put them last week off the back of Councillor Chris McElhenny's interview. Ruby says, well done, Chris. I share your philosophical belief. And finally from Tommy, who says, this has been an important case. It puts to rest the sort of discrimination that SNP activists have always quietly endured. Now let's take a look at a new angle on Brexit. A Scottish MP, albeit a passionate pro-European, has still seized on Brexit uncertainty to advocate a revived direct ferry link with the continent. Alex takes up the story.
One of the most unexpected aspects of the Brexit debate has been to focus attention on the ferry business. The danger of 20-mile tailbacks in the Garden of England in Kent if there's even a 2-minute delay at Dover has concentrated minds. And then there was the controversy about the letting out to a contract to a company to operate out of Ramsgate who didn't seem to have any ferries. But Dunfermline West Fife MP Douglas Chapman has another idea, another prospect that the threat of Brexit might open. Douglas Chapman, welcome to the Alex Salmond Show.
Hello. Yeah.
Now, what's this idea you've got about restarting a ferry route to the continent from Scotland?
Well, we've had a ferry route that goes from Rosyth to Zeebrugge, and that's been in the past. And what we're looking at now is the option of bringing that ferry back into service. It would need to be a completely new company, a new operator, but we believe that given the export potential of Scotland, given the fact we want a symbolic link with the heart of Europe, heart of Scotland to the heart of Europe, I think that the time is absolutely right to reintroduce this ferry service. Now,
obviously, Rosyth is a first-class deep-water port. No problem there. There's also a majestic setting with the 3 bridges.
Absolutely.
But, I mean, it's had a bit of a checkered history, the ferry route. There's been a passenger ferry, a passenger freight ferry and a freight ferry, and it hasn't managed to operate continuously.
That's right. But what we're looking for is a passenger and freight service that would be financially sustainable into the future. We believe that previous ferry operators maybe didn't have the same ideas that we have about making it sustainable, making it a long-term prospect. But with Brexit on the horizon and perhaps even a no deal, as you suggest yourself, with long queues going back from Dover, we can't afford to have Scottish exports languishing on the A2 for hours on end until they can access a ferry service and get through customs. So that's why this prospect has really come to the fore in the last few months.
But surely the SNP are confident you're going to be able to halt Brexit in its tracks. Is that not your... Wouldn't you be kind of stopping your own plan?
Well, not really. I think both options can, we can play both cards, if you like. If there's a hard Brexit, then I think we need in Scotland a clear route right into the heart of Europe. The markets in Europe are not going away just because we've decided as the UK to withdraw from the European Union. And similarly, if there's a no-deal Brexit, then all the problems that come with that, I think Scotland, we cannot leave Scottish industry left exposed, our exporters left exposed to using ports through Dover or Ramsgate or wherever. We need our own ferry service from Rosyth.
But if I was a manufacturer in Scotland at the present moment, I wouldn't have to go to Dover or Ramsgate with all the possible difficulties. I could go to Newcastle, surely, which is pretty close to Scotland. I mean, is it really sustainable to have let's put it, a northern service when there's already one in Newcastle?
Well, we think there is, and not one person along that whole process of discussions has suggested that it's not a good idea, that we shouldn't actually go for this. And I think if we can make the numbers stack up, if we can find new users of that ferry service and maintain that over a longer term, then there's absolutely no reason why we can't have that ferry service running from the Rosyth to Zeebrugge.
Can I ask you your level of support just now? I mean, Zeebrugge seems to be the chosen destination. Why is that? And have you made contacts? Have you been on a visit to Zeebrugge to drum up support already?
Well, they have. I've been to Zeebrugge, and Zeebrugge Port have met with me here in Westminster as well. As have the Flanders government, as have the Scottish government. While the Scottish government are, everybody's saying the same, that we need a good, reliable operator to actually come in and run the service. I'm getting massive support in terms of what people actually want to see at the end of the day. It's how we bring that operator in and make sure that they have the values that we expect of an operator and see the service as being a long-term prospect. And I think from a tourism point of view, it's maybe something we've not touched on yet, but from a tourism point of view, I don't think the services in the past have actually been marketed that well in terms of Germany and northern France and Italy. Scotland remains a huge draw in terms of tourism. This is another route that people can take. They can bring their motorbikes, their motorhomes. It's a whole different market that you can't come by.
It would be the camper vans, wouldn't it?
Camper van, exactly. And the camper van experience there's no better country than Scotland to have that experience, I'm sure.
Now, you've got goodwill, obviously, from the port authorities and Rosyth and Zeebrugge. There's interest from the Flemish government, from the Scottish government. Is there a role for Westminster government? Have you been pressing this in the House of Commons?
What we need to be aware of is that the UK government have put aside £15 million to support ferry contracts to move goods from the south of England into the European market. That's maybe £15 million if we don't have a no-deal Brexit that could be coming to support the ferry service from Rosyth to Zeebrugge.
So what was the response when you said, look, I can secure companies who have got ferries?
Well, exactly. And, I think that from the Scottish Secretary's point of view, he thinks that's an ask that could be legitimately put. Now, whether the UK government would be happy supporting a ferry service in Scotland is another matter, because everything does seem to be a bit south of England focused. But nevertheless, I think there's discussions to be had as regards the future of ferry services across different regional ports in the UK, but certainly the one I want to focus on is the one in Scotland. And, I think Scotland has got the export potential to actually build a really good ferry service along those lines and bring in that vital tourist trade as well that we've been missing for a number of years.
So let's recap. The goodwill from the ports, you think support from the Scottish government, there's interest at least, let's put it no higher, from the Westminster government. But what about the crucial question? Have you got an operator and do they have ferries?
Well, we're working on that right now. There's meetings going on, or have been meetings going on just before Christmas and after Christmas. Where we are just now is that a couple of ferry ships have been identified, and what we need is a go-ahead from one of the operators to say, yeah, we think this is a totally viable service, and perhaps we could, as a starting point, perhaps lease or charter a ship for maybe the first 3 years with a view to actually building a ship that would actually be built for that particular route in the future. So, I think the future is very, very bright, but we need to keep working away at this to actually bring it through to fruition, and that's what I'm trying to do as we speak just now.
Would you not see something of an irony, lastly, Douglas Chapman, in a debate about Brexit, which obviously you don't support and would like a continuation of European membership, stimulating perhaps another chance to get that Scottish link to the heart of Europe? Is there not an irony there somewhere?
I wouldn't say an irony, but I think it's given us an opportunity to relook and rethink how Scotland sees itself as an exporting nation. And, there's great opportunities out there, great opportunities that will remain within Europe. It's, after all, our biggest export market. So why not concentrate our efforts in making sure that we can have that direct link with the remainder of Europe, the 27 countries that we want to walk away from. So I think it would be a great day to watch that ferry sail down the River Forth, and I'm sure there's many flags flying outside Westminster just now, European flags and all sorts of different flags, but it would be great to have a saltire on that ship and watch it sail down the Forth on its first journey to Zeebrugge.
Now, Douglas Chapman, we've had a lot of brouhaha about these tailbacks at 20 miles in Kent, the Garden of England. Is it not just a bit of anti-Brexit scaremongering there?
Well, I think what we've seen is the number of customs officers, for example, in Dover, before we entered what was the common market, number of customs officers then was 300. That's now down to 24. So I think there's justification on the part of the campaign that wants us to remain, that they can see a huge problem with goods going through the customs port of Dover.
So now you're saying that before we entered the single market, 1992, there was 300 customs officers, now there's effectively a handful, and that's why there might be delays and that's why there might be this huge logjam.
Well, exactly, and if anything that extends the time of a big truck going through customs, obviously that's got a huge knock-on effect, and what we're going to see, I think, are huge queues reaching out from Dover along the A2. From my point of view, it's much better to actually cut that problem off at the pass. Have the opportunity for Scottish exporters to actually export right from Scotland, right into the heart of Europe, and that cuts out this whole problem that Scottish exporters are going to have on the tailbacks from Dover.
So you're saying that, and you're guaranteeing as the Dunfermline West Fife Member of Parliament, that if Rosyth gets its new passenger and freight ferry, you'll be able to eliminate the possibility of tailbacks through Fife?
Well, absolutely. One of the things that people have been crying out for in Fife is a new bridge, and we have the Queensferry crossing. We have a rail link.
I remember it.
I remember it well. We have a rail link right into the heart of the port that we can utilise as well. So we have all the infrastructure in place that allows the fast transit of goods from Scotland into the heart of Europe, and I think that's. If you were putting that to someone who was exporting and said, do you want your goods actually on a ship heading into Europe on day one, or do you want it still sitting in a big queue outside Dover on day 3 or 4, then that's a no-brainer for me. And I think we should be giving Scottish exporters that opportunity.
Douglas Chapman, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Stay with us, because coming up after the break, as the Brexit deal is rejected, Alex gets 3 very different viewpoints on what should happen next. Welcome back. The Prime Minister's Brexit plan went up in flames this week, but she still survived a vote of confidence. Therefore, she presides over a parliamentary stalemate with no effective majority for anything. This is how the drama played out.
Isn't it the case, Mr. Speaker, that with every other previous Prime Minister faced with the scale of defeat last night, they would have resigned and the country would be able to choose the government that they want?
He has been calling for weeks for a general election in this country, and yet on Sunday, when he was asked in a general election would he campaign to leave the European Union, he refused to answer. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 5 times he refused to answer. So on what he himself describes as the key issue facing this country, he has no answer.
So with their Brexit, Alex summoned forth a panel of some of our favourite commentators to tell us the direction of travel. If anyone knows, they will.
Mike Galsworthy of the People's Vote campaign, Chris Williamson, Labour MP for Derby North, and Angus Brendan McNeill, the SNP member for Nihilian and Yea, the Western Islands. So, Chris Williamson first, from Labour's perspective, how do you see things developing after this momentous week?
Well, it's an incredible place that we're in at the moment, isn't it? I mean, the government has lost by the biggest margin in history. That's unprecedented. And it's pretty clear from that the House has no confidence in this government. We'll actually see the government falling and we can have a general election, because in my opinion, the only way through this impasse is to have a general election, get a fresh mandate, a new administration elected, so that we can then negotiate a deal that's fit for purpose with the European Union. But that, of course, will mean extending Article 50, of course.
Mike Galsworthy, I think you know the direction you want to go. Do you want a people's vote? But how do you get there? I mean, it seems very difficult to see that situation emerging from this Parliament?
Well, the first step has been this meaningful vote. Remember, this is something that People's Vote campaign were pushing for. We were trying to tell everyone, at least give Parliament the power to boot something into the long grass if they don't like it. And there was lots of Brexiteer opposition to that. Now, actually, they've been using it too, because we all recognise that, as you just heard, this deal is appalling and no one backs it, defeated by 230 votes, 2-to-1 ratio, completely crushing. So that is step one done, actually having this mechanism and using this mechanism to get rid of those bad deals. We're then reliant upon Labour, because Labour have a policy of going first for a general election. So that is what we're going to see today. If that doesn't come out, and I agree, we don't know what's going to happen, but if that doesn't come out, then the next step is, right, we've only got two options now. One is enter this death spiral between kind of like no deal and Theresa May's deal and no deal and Theresa May's deal. And then the other option, if you don't like either of those, is to kick away from that and to have a people's vote. We do need a democratic refresh. If this government won't allow that to be in the form of a general election, then we need to go for the other version, which is the people's vote, where we deal with the issue directly.
Angus Brennan McNeill, you're for a general election. You've got no confidence in Theresa May's government. You're also for a people's vote. But what happens with the SNP strategy if you get neither of these things?
Well, I think the People's Vote's also in an interesting place given what happened last night. The People's Vote was predicated on voting on the deal, as far as I could see from their website, and the deal's now dead. I do think it's interesting to describe the deal and no deal as a death spiral. What really needs to be happening in the perspective of Brexit at the moment, I think, is a revocation of Article 50. They might want to validate it with a referendum afterwards, but the time is short at the moment. 72 days to go. What can industry hope for if we don't get out of this death spiral, as was well described by Mike?
So you would go for a revocation of Article 50 as opposed to asking the European Union for an extension?
I think the potential for the People's Vote to be part of the death spiral as well, because I think really what People's Vote people are about is to get Article 50 revoked, maintain the membership of the European Union. Now, if they go and have a vote, or if they extend Article 50, the time has been kicked on and nothing has been actually sorted. Ultimately, the choice in front of the United Kingdom is either in the European Union or out of the European Union, and it's a no-deal scenario what they've got now, or it's revocation of Article 50. The thing that puzzles me in Scotland is that we are playing too much, I would say, the people's vote when we should get onto our own people's vote. There's only one referendum with a mandate in the United Kingdom at the moment from any political party, and that is the referendum for Scottish independence. And that really, I think, is the way Scotland should be going. Ireland has shown us through this process exactly the power they've got. The UK government has liaised more often with the Irish government, talked more often with the Irish government than it has with the Scottish government, showing the power of independence. And we should be part of the EU 28 or 29 as it would have been had we won in 2014.
So do you think Nicola Sturgeon should seize this moment of parliamentary crisis at Westminster to forward the independence plans?
Absolutely. Nicola Sturgeon has three steps at the moment. She's to identify the window, she's to then identify the process, and then she's got to get specifics on the date. She doesn't have to name the date today, but she has to trigger the gun that it's going to happen within a specific window. I'd advise summer, early autumn 2019, this year, for a referendum. In a month or two's time, she can name the date. She also needs to get the process sorted out by which she's going to ask that. And if she's not going to a referendum, she then has to pinpoint some general election which is doing that. But the Scottish people have waited long enough now. We've been quite patient through the 2.5-year comedy at Westminster. We have to move on.
Chris Williamson, this question of an extension of this deadline, this looming deadline of March the 27th, can it be done by an extension merely, or do you have to have the option of revoking Article 50? I mean, even if Labour were to get themselves into power, you would need an extension in order to put forward your plans.
I think the unilateral revocation, though, of Article 50 would be a democratic outrage, and I worry that, if we were to...
Not for Scotland, of course.
Well, OK, yeah, maybe not, but certainly for England and Wales, I think it would cause, potentially civil unrest. I mean, there's already incredible cynicism about the political process, people feeling, very, very strongly. We've had the biggest democratic engagement, in the referendum. Look, I campaigned for Remain, by the way, but people voted the way that they did.
This is interesting. You're a Remainer who campaigned for Remain, but even given the circumstances of the total botch of Brexit, you still think it's not possible to maintain that position in view of the referendum result in 2016?
I do, because I think it would, as I've said, be a democratic outrage, and there would be... I really worry there'd be civil unrest. But the key thing is redistribution of income and wealth. The economy could shrink from the 5th, 6th, to the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th even, biggest economy in the world. But if we had a policy of redistribution, we could lift the living standards of the 99% That is the key. Redistribution, not membership of what, let's remember, is a neoliberal club.
I would just say we need that fiscal stimulus now. The shocks of the European Union departure are going to be 6 to 8% of GDP. We'd have to make up that gap and then some more. And that is that's hundreds of billions of pounds. Now, why don't we just do without that fiscal shock of the 6 to 8% of GDP, and then do the anti-austerity measures that we all agree on should happen?
We've seen, Mike, that two members of Parliament with similar attitudes across a range of issues have very different strategies of how we get out of this conundrum. Now, given that, with 650 MPs, many of whom range across the political spectrum, how on earth can the People's Vote campaign persuade enough to combine together to secure your objective?
Right. It's a bit of a mess at the moment in terms of where parliamentarians are at. That is not an understatement. As you were saying before, you do need an extension in one form or another. For those that want to crash out, you kind of need an extension as well, just because the blockage of stuff that needs to get through Parliament. If you want a general election, you have certainly got to have an extension as well in order to make that happen. And if you want to address the issue directly through a People's Vote campaign, you also need an extension. That is something that at least we can agree on. What I am talking about, and what the others who want a People's Vote are talking about, is when you don't get that general election coming through, you don't get to have your democratic refresh through the new manifestos placed on the table. That is denied, that is shut down. And you have a government that is a broken government, hobbling on anyway, getting in the way of what you want to achieve, getting in the way of what you want to achieve. So how do you boot off their pet project that has caused so much trouble? And then if you were to have a People's Vote and the answer comes back, we still want to leave on one deal or another, this government then has to deal with it. We're back in the same place. But if you have a People's Vote with a Remain answer, then this government is clearly being called out by Parliament and then the people for wasting 2.5 years of time. Their pet project is booted, and you can come in with new manifestos saying, now that that's out of the way, this is how we address inequality, this is how we address redistribution and all the social issues that are being caught behind the blockage of Brexit. And the Tories will not be able to govern from that point because the DUP will have nothing to support them on. They cannot govern from that point, and they will also be internally split. I mean, if you're a Labour person, this would be a massive win for Labour.
OK, so is that the bottom line? One way or other, there has to be an extension of some kind.
I mean, the moment we're at political stalemate. That is hard to see a movement in the politics today. Now, much as I would like the vote of no confidence against the Prime Minister today and to move on, as Chris would as well, I don't think that's going to happen. What I think needs to start happening is politics, been stalemate, economics have got to come in and steamroller over this. The guys who are waiting for just-in-time manufacturing are looking at oblivion now in 72 days' time if nothing happens. So they've got to start raising their voices. They've got to skate into the revocation game or the extension game and do it very, very quickly. Because if they don't, there's going to be that shock, that loss of GDP is coming very soon.
Chris Williamson, sometimes government survival doesn't depend on having a majority to survive vote confidence. It's about having the will to govern. And I was very struck by the meeting after the rejection of the Prime Minister's plans with business leaders, where, according to reports from the business leaders, the Chancellor, the Brexit Secretary and the Business Secretary had different versions to offer them of the route ahead. I've never heard of that before. Is that an indication that perhaps the will or the ability to govern may collapse in this government, whatever the result in the vote of confidence is?
Well, you'd think so, wouldn't you? I mean, we are definitely in uncharted territory here, and you know, I've never seen such chaos. And you know, I remember the 74 to 79 Labour government, and they struggled on for about 3 years in a minority. But I don't think there was ever this level of chaos. But Theresa May has got limpet-like qualities, and she's managed to stick around in a way which I would have thought was, well, would have been impossible. Not would have thought, would have been impossible for any other leader. What leader would have survived calling an election with a majority government and then find themselves in a minority at the end of that process? What other leader would have survived a vote calling the government in contempt of Parliament or losing key stages of their finance bill? But she's managed to stick around. She's certainly got stickability. Whether or not that, you know, that adhesiveness will last, I don't know. She's certainly wearing it out, it seems to me.
So our last word for each of you. Theresa May, the Houdini of politics, but in a phrase, what's the end game of Brexit?
The end game of Brexit is to actually challenge Brexit. You've got this limpet Prime Minister that is holding on to her place, and the whole country is getting damaged because of it, and you can't get any other agenda going forward because of it. If you can't get a refresh in terms of manifestos, then you need to take it on head on.
Chris Williamson, endgame.
Well, the end game is that we're going to leave the European Union. I think that is a fact. I don't think there's any way out of that. And frankly, I think even a second referendum would almost certainly bring back a similar result, if not a bigger majority for leave. That's my sense, certainly, anyway, of public opinion at the moment.
Angus McNeill, endgame of Brexit.
Well, the end game of Brexit, for the economic damage and for leaving the European Union, the end game of Brexit has to be for Scotland to have an independence referendum and to move on to be a country like Ireland, to be a normal country of the European Union. And that is our end game. When we see what the chaos is at Westminster and the ideas for the future are at Westminster to be sort of on the fringes and on the edges, we want to be part of Europe. We'll be given that opportunity, the Scottish people. It should be noted that in opinion polls in Scotland, the European Union is more popular than the United Kingdom.
Well, gentlemen, in a position of total chaos, I wouldn't say you've charted one way through these waters, but perhaps 3 different ways, but at least a way forward. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And so the deed is done, and thus the Prime Minister's European policy is undone. The Ides of January are past, and by an epic majority of 230, the largest defeat of any government in history on a central part of their political programme, but instead of being carried out in her shield, the Prime Minister just carries on, totally aimlessly, wandering towards no particular destination whatsoever. And so will Parliament now assert itself and negotiate a softer Brexit? Or will we just continue in chaos and confusion, hurtling towards a cliff edge that few really want to plunge off? Whatever is to be done now, there has to be more time. The total folly 18 months ago of invoking Article 50 without what we could now describe as a British backstop, that is, knowing where you'll be in the event of no deal, has never been more apparent. But we know now from the Scottish and European courts that this mistake can be rectified. Revoking Article 50, or at least agreeing a significant extension with Europe now, would create the time and the space for one of 3 things to happen. Parliament could come to that elusive consensus. Secondly, you could hold an election. Or 3, you could let the people decide again. Whatever choice is made, it would be infinitely preferable to the current impasse, for this disparate government being in office but not in power, and for a disparate opposition holding the parliamentary power but not being in office. And so from Taz and me and the rest of the team, it's goodbye for now.